And on top of all that, when we started to believe that we are a body, our self-worth hit rock bottom. Because we could no longer see that we are created, that we are sons and daughters of God, of Brahma, of Allah, of Dharmakaya, of the I am that I am. And consequently, as a consequence, obviously God, Brahma, Allah doesn't create junk. So we are the most valuable thing in all of creation. But when we started to believe that we are a physical body, we could not remember that we are absolutely worthy and absolutely valuable because God had created us. And so we started to base our self-worth on our physical body and on what we possessed in a material sense. Because that was all we could see. Because that was all we could see, and hence, that is what we thought is all of reality. And so we started to base our self-worth and our physical body on our physical looks and on what we possessed in a material sense. And not only would we judge our own self-worth on what we possessed in a material sense and what we looked like physically, but we would also judge the value of any other person based on their physical bodies and on what they possessed in a material sense. Does any of this sound familiar to you? It's our society today. And, well, so we started to place our self-worth outside of ourselves instead of going inside to remember that our true value, that our true worth comes from who we are. We started to seek outside for approval, for acknowledgement, for love, for kindness. We needed others to tell us how good and wonderful we are, to help build us, to help build up our self-worth. Because we started to base our worth on what we looked like and on what we possessed in a material sense. And now, on top of everything else, once we started to believe that we are a body, and once we started to see separation, and hence started to find a false evidence, started to find a false reason to live in fear, and hence started to live in illusion, we started to live out of our lower self, because we could no longer remember that we had a higher self. We could no longer remember that we are the eternal self. And so we started to live out of our lower self as we started to believe that we are bodies. And we started to become really selfish because we could no longer see that I am you and you are me and we are one because God, Brahma, Allah, Dharmakaya, the I am that I am, has in truth only one son or one daughter. And in truth, we all share in this one sonship and daughtership of God. And so we could no longer see that whatever I would give to another person, I in truth was giving to myself. We could no longer see that if I want to have friends, I need to show myself friendly. If I want to have love, I need to give love. If I want to have peace, I need to give peace. And if I want to have God for myself, I need to give God to everyone around me. Instead, we started to see that I am here and you are there and we are two. And so what started to develop is duality. We call it the top-dog, underdog duality or mentality. Because when we started to believe that we are a body, and when we started to compare, hence, our bodies with others, and started to compare what we possessed in a material sense with others, we started to compare and compete and judge with others, And we started to put others down, so we could, in putting others down in our own mind, decrease the value of other people. And hence, this would put us into the top dog position, which would give us a false sense of self-worth and a false sense of power. And so this is the state of consciousness from which we entered relationships. We entered relationships from a state of consciousness of believing that we are a body, that we are separate from one another and separate from source. Hence living in fear, which is false evidence appearing real. Hence living in illusion. Hence, since we started to think we are a body, living out of our lower self and becoming really selfish, living in duality because we had to constantly compare and compete with others to remain in the top dog position. And from this state of consciousness of having no self-worth, no real self-worth, and basing our self-worth on what we looked physically and what we possessed in a material sense, from this state of consciousness, we started to form relationships. But you cannot possibly be right with another person if you are not right with yourself. And you cannot possibly be right with yourself if you identify yourself with your body. Because every thought you think is a lens you see through. Every person in truth is seeing their own thoughts. Reality itself is neutral. What we see is what we extend. What we see is the thoughts that we extend into this reality. So if you think you are a body, if you think separative, fear-based, illusionary, lower self, selfish thoughts, you will project duality, fear, separation, duality, etc., onto other people. And so it is not possible to form a right relationship with another person if you think all these thoughts, if you are not right with yourself. But this is mass consciousness. This is the consciousness of humanity en masse. In the I Am University, we call this kind of consciousness negative ego, fear-based, separative, dualistic, illusionary, selfish, lower self-consciousness. So you see, we are closing the circle now, and we are coming back to our question, which is, or which was, what is ego? And what does all this ego talk from earlier have to do with all the problems in our society today? Well, ego is a sense of individuality that comes along with having a body. And there's nothing wrong with having a body, because having a body, having a form, allows your essence, which is your monad, or your mighty I Am presence, or your eternal self, as they would call it in Hinduism, or your Christ self, as they would call it in Christianity, or your Buddha nature, as they would call it in Buddhism. It allows your true identity, your essence, to have a form through which to express yourself in this world. So even when we first came to this planet, and even when it first was in etheric world, and we had etheric bodies, having a body just allowed our essence to have a form